Fun. Well, hey, Dave Melenda here, Positive Polarity Podcast. Hope things are going awesome for you this week. I got a two-part question for you. So you're getting double the money this week, and we are going to unpack a great topic. And the question is, when was the last time you thought about business growth? Now, you may are thinking about it right now as you're listening, but the more important question, which we're going to unpack, is like, what did you do about it? Because, I have to say for myself, being an entrepreneur and business owner my whole career, it's like it's always on my mind. And I'm like, I gotta find somebody that's got that on their brain as well. So I'm honored to be hanging out with Luis Scott. How are you today, my friend?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. You are the owner and founder of a company called Eight Figure Firm Consulting. So fill us in on what that is what's going on over there.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard of so many companies that help businesses get to seven, and then there was a few companies that help businesses get to 10 figures or nine figures, excuse me, and there was a space for eight figures, 10 million and above. And I was actually sitting at a pool with a friend of mine in Puerto Rico, and we were just joking about like what would my consulting company be, and we were like eight-figure firm, and I was like, oh well, let's look it up, and it wasn't a registered trademark, and nobody had claimed the website, and everything seemed to like line up. So we immediately
Yeah.
claimed the site, claimed the trademark, and the rest is history. So we help businesses scale and grow so that they can live the lives they want, and that's what I think it's all about.
That's awesome. And you've written five books, which we'll go through some of those throughout our time together. And you're the podcast host for the Guts and Glory show. So you got a podcast, you got books. So you got a ton of content. So I'd love to ask the question because, again, we have business owners listening from around the world. We also have a lot of people, Luis, that want to start a business, but they really don't know where to start.
Mhm.
So love asking you your journey and prepping for today. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is like a unique journey. So I love to unpack and you share whatever you feel comfortable sharing about your transition from corporate America to owning your own business. What did that look like for you?
It's interesting because I've always felt like I was an entrepreneur, even when I was younger, when I was still living at home. I was the kid. I had three siblings, so there's four of us in total, and I was the kid that would volunteer to clean the bathroom for $1, that would iron all of my parents' clothes for $5, cut the grass, wash the car. I'd go get the gallon of milk down the street on my bike and keep the change. So I was
Yeah.
always hustling, trying to find a way to make extra money. And I remember living in Puerto Rico. That's where I was raised. I was probably 9 or 10 years old, and my grandmother was building an extension to her house. And in one summer, I was able to save an unbelievable sum, almost $30, just working my butt off. And I was rich. Like I thought I
Yeah.
was rich. But I grew up, and people have money mindset issues because of the way they grow up. And I love my parents, but my parents were not entrepreneurs. And my mom used to always say, money doesn't grow on trees. So I grew up very fearful that I was not going to have enough money to survive, or that I was not
Sure.
going to be able to earn enough money. And so that's really where my journey of entrepreneurship came in. I wanted to learn. I wanted to figure out, how was I going to make enough money to live the life that my parents never lived but wanted for us, and to live the life of my dreams. And that's where my journey started. And that took me on a course of meeting some accidental mentors, just people who came across my path that I really took advantage of their knowledge and wisdom, and just learned a lot of things about how people behave, how people act, what are the needs that people have. And that set off a series of events that eventually led me to owning several businesses. And so that was my journey. It was just this desire to be successful, this desire to have enough, and then learning how to work with people, and spot things that people needed, so that I could deliver on that need.
Oh, that's pretty cool. Well, I wrote down two points that I want to make sure that we cover because I love that thought. First one was money mindset issues. So when you say that, because I've never really had those three words put together in that context before. So help the listener understand what that means because it might be a blind spot for them. It might be a limiting thought that they have, but fill us in on kind of what that looks like for you.
For me, money mindset issues come in like a variety of forms, but a lot of times it manifests itself in limited belief thoughts, right? So this idea that $100,000 per year is a significant amount of money. Now, don't get me wrong. Somebody may be
Yeah.
listening and be like, "Who is this guy thinking that 100,000 is not a lot?" That's
Right.
and I'm not saying that it's not a top, 8% income in the United States and in the world. What I'm
Yeah.
saying is that if you believe that $100,000 is a lot of money, it's going to be very hard to make $100,000 a month. It's going to be very hard to make $100,000 a week, right? Because if
Sure.
you think 100,000 a year is a lot of money, you're never going to go outside of your comfort zone to earn more. And so this limited mindset or these money mindset issues creep up in subconscious ways. So I have a friend of mine who, for many years, 10 years, had a business, and his best year was $50,000. And so I started working with him. He wasn't a law firm owner, but I wanted to work with him because I really believed in him. He was a friend of mine for 25 years. And I remember him telling me the story of how he grew up. And I knew how he grew up because I knew his parents. I've known him since high school, but I didn't know the inner workings of things they used to tell him. They used to tell him that that making money was bad and rich people were
Yeah.
evil, and
Sure.
and down with capitalism and stuff like that. So he grew up believing that making money was a
Yeah.
problem. Making money was like evil. And so imagine running a business and thinking that making money is evil. That mindset
Yeah.
kept him contained. And so we
Sure.
worked for 6 months trying to overcome this idea that money was evil and that it was the root of all evil and all this stuff. And the next thing you know, he took his business from 50,000 to 750,000 in 18 months. And it was all
Wow.
because of unlocking that moment. It didn't have anything to do with the work ethic or the mechanics. It was
Sure.
the refusal to self sabotage, right? And that's unfortunately what we do many times subconsciously.
Wow. So I have a question for you personally, because your dad was a pastor when you were growing up. Was that limiting that money mindset issue there as well? Was that something that you picked up, or did he have a pretty healthy outlook on finances?
I think that he was not really my mom was more of the type of person who was like, money doesn't grow on trees. It's so hard to make money. It's so hard to keep money. And look at
Yeah.
all the struggles we've gone through and all the suffering we've had and all the difficulty. So I was just like, man, money must be super hard. And I remember being in my early 20s and going, yeah, it's impossible to get ahead in life. I mean, we're going to be on the we're going to be on the economic treadmill of life forever
Yeah.
because money doesn't grow on trees, and it's so hard to obtain, and it's so hard to keep. And I went into business thinking these things like, yeah,
Sure.
this is going to be a grind. This is 16 hours a day for the rest of your life if you even
Yeah.
want to figure out how to pay for rent.
Yeah.
And so that really held me back, and they didn't mean to do it. It's just the environment they grew up in. Things weren't plentiful, and so it's really hard to teach abundance when you're not accustomed to it.
Well, but yet reverse, you talked about your mom baked 200 loaves of bread for one of your neighbors. So, she was giving. So it wasn't like it was a hoarding issue. It wasn't like it's all
Yeah.
me, it's all mine, right? So is that, how does the giving part work in your world from that perspective? I'm just curious.
Yeah, I mean, I think that givers are receivers, and this may be too long of an explanation, but I'll try to shorten it as much as I can. But my parents sowed a lot of seeds, and they did not harvest through their own professional work. Like they didn't become entrepreneurs that made millions of dollars, but
Yeah.
they have benefited because they sowed into their kids, and their kids have made them very rich beyond their dreams. My parents have a house of their dreams, and my parents, this week I'm so proud. I bought tickets to take my dad to the Masters because it's Masters week, and so these are kind of things that they would have not have been able to do on their own, but because they
Yeah.
sowed into us, we've been able to do that. My brothers have taken my parents on trips around the world, right? And so they have harvested those seeds of generosity, but sowing seeds of generosity doesn't always materialize in business wealth, right? It
Sure. Sure.
materializes in other ways, maybe rich friendships or relationships that you can never buy. And that's what they have. When I think about my parents, they have unbelievable relationships around the world, and they've done amazing things. They never became wealthy in business.
Yeah.
They became wealthy in a lot of different areas of life.
Well, and I think that that kind of brings up a question about business growth because to you, business growth might mean one thing, and to me or someone listening might mean something else. So,
Mhm.
did you have to kind of wrestle with where did you want to be once you were able to kind of work through the money mindset issues?
Mhm.
Now there's like this path, this, path to growth that you created. And I mean, I'm just curious, was it like did you know what that end result was, or does it kind of evolve as you go? What does that look like for you?
I think it has evolved. And looking back, I remember doing the 369 affirmation process, which is you write your affirmations 3 times in the morning, 6 times at lunch, 9 times at night. And I remember, first of all, almost having carpal tunnel from doing that because that's a lot of writing when you're writing your goals. But in my
Yeah.
20s, my goal was to make $1 million by the time I was 30 years old. And
Right.
that didn't happen. That didn't happen at all. But I was learning a lot of things and I was in pursuit of this goal. And it didn't happen at 31, 32, 33, 34. It didn't happen until I was 37. But I always tell the joke that I never actually made $1 million. The first time I ever made 1 million, I actually made 2.5 million. And so it's amazing because there's something called the quantum leap, which is when you actually figure something out, it just clicks and everything seems to just fall in order. And I
Yeah.
spent almost 20 years trying to figure it out. And when I did figure it out, I went right through that barrier that I have. And so for me, an amount of money that I'm going to earn is not actually what I'm in pursuit of. I'm really more in pursuit of creating a level of predictability around my personal brand. So I want to make sure that my personal brand is of such a nature that I can create income on command. That's what I
Mhm.
want. Not so much 5 million or 10 million. I could care less about that. I want to be able to create income on command because my brand transcends any kind of business. And so that's really what I'm in pursuit. So it has evolved. It evolved from 1 million to realizing I don't actually have a goal. I just want to be able to make the money when I need it.
Sure. So when you from in your consulting piece though, Luis, the people that you start with working, I gotta believe they either have the money mindset issue, they're limiting themselves, they're not really sure. I mean, do they just are they just like, hey, I'm a piece of clay, mold me to what you need? Do they come in struggling, fighting you on a lot of things? Is there kind of what do you normally see from a new client that you start working with? Is there a consistent pattern?
I have 3 clients. I have the first client is the client that is hungry for more. They want a 20, 30, 40, 50. They want to take over the world, right?
Yeah,
That's client number one. The second client is the client that was intrigued by the brand 8-figure firm and they like the idea of getting to 10 million in revenue. If they could just get to 10 million, they're going to be earning more money they could ever dream of. And then the third client is the client who's struggling, can't figure it out, and they need some help getting over the hump, crossing that barrier. And so I find myself working with all 3 clients, and each one of them has different needs. The one that wants to grow to 50 million, they have a need for leadership and the ability to be a better leader and develop leaders. And the one that wants to get to 10 million has a people problem. They're likely looking for better employees and they don't know how to hire fast enough. And then the
yeah,
person who's just trying to figure it out and get over the hump, they have case acquisition, client acquisition issues. And so we work on client acquisition and marketing. So we do catch people in different parts of their life. And it's not even age dependent. I have young people who are wanting to dominate the world, and I have old people who want to dominate the world. I have young people who can't figure it out. I have old people who can't figure it out. So it kind of runs the entire,
sure.
age spectrum.
Wow. Out of those three buckets of people, Luis, is there any consistency there of, a mind issue? Is there a consistency or is there something consistent that everybody has, or is this really a pretty open ball of wax there, so to speak?
I do think that there's a consistency. Like at the lower level with the client acquisition level, most of those people are in the there's too much competition belief. And
Okay.
so they believe there's too much competition, so they manifest low client sales because in their mind it's so hard to get clients, right? My top people, they don't think there's any competition. In fact, people better watch out for them. Like that's how they believe.
Yeah.
That
Yep.
middle group that's trying to get 10 million, they believe that finding good workers is very hard. They all say the same
Okay.
thing. Finding a
Sure.
good worker is hard. Young people are lazy. They say all these things. My top
Yeah.
group, they don't think that. They know there's good workers and they know there's good people and they know there's so much business to get. And then the top group, what they really struggle with is this idea that people don't come into the business ready to work. They demand that people come ready to work, so they don't focus on employee development and they don't focus on leadership development. And so you have to teach them, like, hey, you have to be a better leader and you have to train better leaders if you want this business to go to 50 million. You can't, everybody who comes into your business, I don't care if they're a 20-year veteran, they're not ready to run your business. It's a different business. And that's probably the most shocking thing for people when I tell them I have a $50 million firm and another $50 million firm, same practice area. And I don't believe that one leader of one firm could work in the other one on day one. People find that very
Yeah.
shocking, but it's absolutely
Sure.
true.
Wow. Well, and you brought it up earlier. So thinking about the masters and you think about the countless hours of practice that these guys have done to get to that level. But yet, when you think about practicing leadership or, who practices their job?
Right.
It's like, hey, we're going to practice team building today. We're not going to do any team building. We're going to practice it. It's like we do a lot of team building exercises with our clients, and they look at you like, what is this for? And it's like, well, this is practice. And they're like, we don't got time to practice. And it's like, I couldn't imagine any golfer. Tiger Woods is my favorite golfer. I couldn't
Mhm.
imagine the guy saying, you know what? I don't have time to practice today. It's like, man, I just think that's such a blind spot for entrepreneurs. Do they generally come into you, Luis, with like, I already know this, and they're trying to tell you what to do, or are they pretty open at by the time they end up in front of you?
I think that there are some people who come with this I already know it mentality, and I've already tried that, I've already done that. One of my
Yeah,
favorite sayings: if I ever tell you something you've already done, just do it again because you didn't do it right the first time. So that's why we're asking. But most of the people, because of my background and what they know of me, and many of them have read my book, they come ready to receive for the most part. I don't really get a lot of pushback because obviously I wrote a book called The King of Growth, and the book is my life's work, and we send out 500 copies a month. So people come ready to listen to somebody who they read a book of, who they now believe in that system, and so it's. But I do have some knuckleheads every once in a while who think they know everything.
do they soften up over time, or do they just kind of go by the wayside and they just kind of disappear by themselves?
They soften up when we get a breakthrough for them.
Okay.
If we can get a breakthrough for them pretty quickly, which is one
Yeah.
of the three B's of retention, but if you can get a breakthrough with them really quickly, they will soften up. If you can't get that breakthrough for them quickly, they will just fizzle out and tell you that your system doesn't work. But
Yeah.
they never came in to work the system, so that's probably why it doesn't work for them.
Sure. Well, and you said your book is one of your books is The King of Growth. And I think the next words there is how to dominate your market. And so I'm thinking people aren't necessarily thinking market domination. A
Mm-hmm.
lot of times it's like just market survival at this point, right? Just keep my
Right.
head above water. It's the old adage where if we're running from the cops, I just have to be faster than you,
Mm-hmm.
and that's like that doesn't seem to be a very healthy business perspective, because at the first sign of any issues, it seems like we're looking around going, we have a weak team, we have a weak customer experience, everything's kind of, all jumbled together. So do people come in with that thought of, hey, Luis, I want to dominate this market and I want you to show me how to do that? Is that a pretty normal response for people?
That's probably like the top 5 or 10% of people who hire eight-figure firm. I have a law firm from Boston that on the very first call, the discovery call that we had with them, I asked them what their goal was, and so that we can get an idea of what they're looking to do. They said they want to be the largest firm in America. They want to be known as the largest firm in America. And I said, you do realize there's some people who are already at $1 billion, right? Like we can get there. I just want you to know this is a long process. But yeah, they came in with with that idea, like we're going to dominate and we're going to really take over. But that's probably a smaller subset of people.
So what do they come with? I mean, sorry, what do they come with? Some limited to you, 10 millions here.
Mhm.
I mean, are they, hey, I'd be happy at a million. I'd be happy at 2 million. Do
Well,
you get
the
people
ones
that are at that spot?
I don't. So I really believe that your messaging attracts a certain type of person, and we're
Okay.
trying to attract winners. That's all of our
Gotcha.
messaging is about attracting winners. So we talk about $1 million incomes. Like if you want to create $1 million income stream that's predictable year after year, that's so the majority of the people that are hiring us are people looking for that $1 million income year after year. It very rarely do people come in and just want to reach a million.
Sure.
It does happen, but my goal is to attract people between 3 to 5 million who are looking for 10 million and above, and we've done a
Gotcha.
pretty good job over the years to do that because once you realize that there's a formula to generating business, then really the sky becomes a limit at that point.
Wow. Hey, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, I want to turn the corner and kind of talk about this healthy culture and healthy team because you've referred to it a couple times. So I want to kind of unpack that. So we'll be right back. Welcome back. I'm honored to be hanging out with Luis Scott, owner and founder of the firm called Eight Figure Firm Consulting. And we are knee deep in business growth, which is awesome topic. So hopefully for you listening, you're gaining some ideas. Maybe it's your mindset that you got to work through. Luis talked before the break about accidental mentors. So be on the lookout for people that are around you. I have a side question on that. I hear this thing, you're like the sum of the top five people that you hang around with. And are you, as a consultant for yourself, are you very particular as to who you will allow in your inner circle?
Not only am I very particular about who I allow in my inner circle, I don't take any kind of advice from you if you haven't achieved anything that I'm trying to achieve. So it's if I have a friend who's trying to give me advice on anything and they haven't successfully achieved what I'm looking to achieve,
Right.
I don't even I forget it the very second that they say it. And I that may
Yeah.
sound pretentious, but it is what it is. I have to guard my mind and my heart, and I can't just let it, any advice infiltrate or penetrate me, because that's gonna affect me. So I'm always looking for people who have achieved something. I have a good friend of mine who's really big into real estate. They're part of a syndicate, and they've invested in apartment complexes with 100 apartments. Like that's who I want to talk to if I'm going to get into real estate. I'm not going to talk to you who has one Airbnb,
Right.
and it's not even a successful Airbnb that you didn't even put 20% down. You put 5% down and got it refinanced, a couple of times. Like that's not who I want to talk to.
Yeah, and I think that that's so helpful to keep that thought process in front of you to be really cautious on who you invest time and energy with, because a lot of times, like we always say, I've never seen, they always say one bad apple ruins the whole bushel, right?
Mm-hmm.
I've never seen reverse where that bad apple turned good because of all those other good apples. There was so much good in the other apples that it turned that rotten one not rotten.
Yeah.
So, which kind of leads us into this discussion. So you talk about, healthy company culture. You talk about this, and when you're talking about these growth situations. So how, there are a lot of people, Luis, that say it's really hard to find good help. And I'm not here to say it is or it isn't. I just want to know when someone says that to you, what's your response? And because it feels like an excuse, kind of.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like I'm taking the easy way out. I'm looking at the glass half empty. So when somebody comes to you and is like, I can't find anybody or I can't keep anybody, we run into a lot of different team dynamics there. How do you respond to them?
I mean, I always tell them that again, this comes to mindset. If you continue to believe that, it's very likely that that's what's going to happen. I don't have any problems hiring people. I mean, I tell people all the time that my company's been in business only 4.5 years. Prior to that, I was a law firm owner for many years. But in 4.5 years, we've hired 27 people. We have 21 on staff. So I've only lost in 4.5 years, I've only lost 5 people.
Yeah.
And that's pretty impressive. And so it's not finding good people is not very difficult. It's creating a culture where good people want to come to work for you. And the best people only want to work for great organizations. They don't want to work for organizations that suck the life out of you. And I wrote a book, Building High Performance Teams. And there's three
Oh,
parts to building a high performance team. And it's you have to have clarity, alignment, and trust. And so what happens many times is that we're not clear on our goals and objectives and what we're looking for. There's no alignment amongst the team. And alignment comes through communicating properly the vision, mission, values of the organization. And there's no trust. And trust it can be experiential, and it can also be in the way we communicate. And so if you want to have an organization that thrives, you have to be clear. What am I looking for? What is the type of candidate that I want? You have to
yeah.
be aligned. Does that candidate actually care about the vision, mission, and values of our organization? And then trust. Can I trust them? Can they trust me? And have I done a good
Yeah.
job at creating that trust circle? And if you can't answer yes to all three of those, then it's very likely that you're not going to find the right people for your organization.
Wow, that's great. So really, like you said, it starts with the mindset of I can't find good people. You're going to continue to struggle with that mindset because you probably won't find good people with that thought process. I'm curious though on you're talking about clarity and you're talking about, finding the right person. We use DISC a lot to be able to understand that person, and a lot of my clients use it in hiring. So what we do is, you build this avatar of this is if the job could talk, it would say it needs these things from this individual. I've been finding the opposite to be true, where people find a resume and then they try to fit the job to the resume.
Right.
Um, how do you think on that spot? Because there's kind of both ways seem like they could work. I find a good person, and hey, that seat might not be the right seat in the bus, or I got this great job and I got to just fit this person into that. So I'm just curious, where do you land on that thought?
I think it depends on where you are in your business. When you're fitting a person into a job, you're fitting the person into a system. When you're fitting the job to a person, you're building a personnel based organization, meaning the personality of the personnel is what
Yeah,
drives the organization. I think early on in your business, being personality based is okay because you're small enough and you really want a really tight team. But as you get bigger, you need to make sure that you're fitting the right people into the right jobs and not trying to organize the entire business around a particular person. Because if that person leaves, gets hit by a bus, now
yeah,
you've built a job around a personality. But there's a
sure.
cliche, and I really believe that this is true, and that is you attract who you are, not what you want. And many times we want an A player, but we're not A players in our work ethic, or we want an
Right.
organized person, but we're not organized, and we want a vulnerable and transparent person, but we're not vulnerable and transparent. And so we need to start building ourselves. If you want to be a high octane, growth minded entrepreneur, you need to start building yourself and become
Yeah.
the person who's eligible for the right team. And when you do that, the right team will be attracted to you.
Wow, that's great. Which then becomes this culture piece because I don't know about you, but I ask people around the country and I ask them what is their company culture. Oh, we don't have one. I'm like, okay, well, everyone's got one. Now maybe yours is doesn't matter. It's
Yeah.
every man for himself or whatever. But like if you had to explain to somebody what is the culture of the eight-figure firm, what would you say? What are some of the words that kind of come to your mind? Or what are the words that you've built your culture
Mm.
on just for people listening?
It would be very clear for our team. In fact, one of our rules is that you can't get a promotion or raise unless you can state the VMVs, vision, mission, and values. I only hire based on those. I fire based on those as well. And our culture is a culture of a group of people who care about the work that they do so much that it becomes the most significant thing in their life, meaning what they have been born to do is to contribute to these organizations, the people we lead, the people that are our clients, our members, to such a high degree that we leave a lasting impact in their lives. And recently, I was meeting with our team, and I told them the most important core value in our organization is a life of significance. If you don't want to be significant in the lives of other people, if you don't want to live a significant life, if you want to live a life that absolutely doesn't matter and you're forgotten for the rest of eternity, this is not
Yeah.
the place for you. But
Yeah.
if you care so deeply that you're willing to go the extra mile, be generous, and have unshakable faith about what you do with our members, then this is
Yeah.
the place for you. And one of the things that I love, I heard this a long time ago. I didn't make this up, and it's not about how many people you help, but rather to the depth that you help them. And so for me, it's all about depth. How much depth are we creating? How much significance are we creating? And are we in focused on leaving a legacy in this world? And that's the culture that we've created.
And I gotta believe, Luis, that there's plenty of people that that doesn't align with.
Of
And then
course.
they end up like not working out, or maybe they want to do the fake it till you make it thing, so they
Mhm.
try it for a little bit. But I'm guessing if I came to you and said, "Hey, I'm not there yet, but I authentically want to get there," that's way better in your world, I'm guessing, than me saying, "Hey, I'll be do anything," and then you find out right away that that's not the case. I gotta believe that authenticity is a pretty important part to your culture.
Yes, and the thing is that the way that you hire really determines whether you find the right person at the interview. At the interview, I tell people what I expect. I tell them that I expect if they're consultants specifically, maybe not our admin team as much, but
Yeah,
they do hear this. If you're a consultant on my in my organization, I expect that you're going to work more than 40 hours. You may work 50 or 60. I expect you may work nights and weekends. I expect you to be at the conference. I expect you to teach. I expect you. I tell them all these things, and if the person
yeah,
says, "Well, I don't want to work 40 hours, more than 40 hours," well, okay, bye. And look, you don't. There's so many organizations you can go work for. It's just not going to be this one, you
right.
know.
Yep.
And so when a person starts giving me any kind of pushback about our, and it doesn't happen because we're very so upfront about this. If you
Yeah.
start giving me issues about coming to our conference or working nights and weekends, that I mean, I'm going to remind you that you said that none of this was a
Yeah.
problem. You said that you wanted your life to be significant. And so now I just want to know, do you not want your life to be significant, or are you just a liar? Just tell me which one of those two things it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Something change in your world, right? Where it's all of a sudden not an issue anymore, for sure.
right, for sure.
Well, and I love that clarity. So that's the first part of building that successful team is having that clarity. And I think whether it's onboarding, it's the process of hiring, the more intentional that you become through that process, the higher likelihood of success you're going to have on the back end. It's crazy how many people's onboarding consists of a 30-minute, discussion, and that's it. Here's where you park, here's your, here's where you sit, here's the bathroom, I'll take you to lunch today, here's your passwords, if you got any questions, give me a buzz. It's not the Energizer Bunny where you just point and shoot. You got to wind these people up, and a lot of times, I think it's all the leadership. I kind of blame. I get pretty open about that for leaders when they try to blame the team. I'm just like, yeah, yeah. I mean, it's super easy to be a basketball coach, right, and blame the players, but you are involved and in charge of the practices, you're involved in charge of the lineup, so you have a lot of things to do there. So do you
Yep.
get people that kind of point their finger at you and just try to blame you as the leader?
Well, I mean, they probably do, and I mean, I haven't had it in open forum, but I
Yeah,
hope they blame me because I'm the one that's responsible. I think if there's an issue in the organization, I think I was the one that created that issue, and
yeah.
if I allowed it to happen, I created it, and if I did it intentionally, I created it. Whether it was intentional or accidental, I created it, and therefore I'm responsible of fixing the issue. And so it all falls on leadership. The leadership is what rises an organization, and the organization falls on leadership. And so at the end of the day, if you want to be a successful business owner, you have to realize that everything, when they say the buck stop here, it doesn't mean with decision making alone. It means with everything that happens in the organization, it's all comes down to you.
Well, and that kind of moves into the alignment piece
Mm-hmm.
because I'm seeing a lot of people that are aligned with the position, but they're not really aligned with the company or the culture or the customer. How do you feel about, looking at a resume that is really aligned well with the position, but maybe the interview didn't go as well and there wasn't clarity and trust, but it aligned well that way versus somebody that didn't necessarily have the skills, words per minute back in the day were important, or I know this platform, I know, we have these technical pieces on our resume, but very few resumes have I'm a team player, or I'm going to do this until it's done, or, whatever those are. Do you see a lot of people focusing still on the skills, the hard skills, let's say, and not the soft skills when they're hiring?
100%. And that's one of the reasons why they have a terrible time with employees because they don't focus on the alignment piece. I use there's, you can use extreme examples to illustrate points. And one of the examples that I always use, especially in today's world, how politically divided we are.
Yeah,
And I work with a lot of immigration firms, and I always ask these immigration firms, would you hire someone who was not 100% aligned with the immigration work that you do? And they would say no. Well, exactly.
yeah,
So
yeah,
so I don't care how good they may be. You may not want to hire someone who is protesting against immigration in your office. That's going to create all kinds of morale problems, right?
yeah,
And in those extreme examples, it's easy to see. There's less extreme examples that are just as relevant that may be, micro issues, but they become macro issues. And so I think that it's a matter of really asking, what is our culture? Who has to align in this culture and believe in this culture? There are people, and the law is a very interesting thing because there are criminal attorneys who won't represent people accused of being pedophiles, right? But there are criminal attorneys that sex assault cases or sex, cases are their bread and butter. Well, if I'm an employee and I don't, and I was either, a victim of this, or I may not want to work there. I'm not going to be aligned in that
sure.
environment. So we got to get very clear as to what is the type of person that we need in this
Yeah,
organization. What do they have to be like? What do they have to believe? What is that they think? And we have to do it without being discriminatory. And that's one of the hardest parts of of being a
right.
business
Oh,
owner
yeah.
is how do we figure that out?
Well, and I think it's easy to just focus on, hey, they used to do this at the job, the facts of the job. You need to do this and this and this. They did it at their last job, so they must be good at it for this job. And
Right.
it seems like a lot of leaders stop short of talking culture, talking about goals. I do some interviewing with some of my clients for them, and it's like you're in the headlight look when you say, hey, where do you want to be in 5 years? Or tell me what, an ideal job looks like for you. I mean, some of these off the normal beaten path questions are getting really hard for people to answer.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just curious from it there there's got to be this fit. I mean, it just kind of I think of this very expensive glove, driving glove, that's hundreds of dollars, thousands maybe. I think of that, and then I think of the mitt for ovens that just, has a thumb and then a big, it's those are two totally different. They're doing similar things, but boy, they're two totally different fits. Are you guys, I mean, are your clients and you guys, you got to be pretty darn particular about making sure that that alignment is there. I'm thinking, correct?
And I think that communicating what that culture is like. I did this presentation a couple of years ago, which was building a cult following. And I said the secret sauce to a culture, right? Because the first four letters of culture is cult. So
Yeah.
building a cult following. And there was 9 sections to this. And basically, I was explaining like how do you build a cult following within your organization, not as your clients or raving fans, but how do your employees become a part of the cult following? And if anybody ever got to meet my team, they would see how aligned we are because I'm very, very firm on what I believe and what I expect and what I want and
Yeah.
how I'm going to lead my organization. And the people who are attracted to that will be attracted to that, and the people who are not will not. And we just want to make sure we know who's who.
Yeah. I don't know why we still want to fit a round peg in a square hole. Back when it was like, hey, if you breathe on a mirror, if you can
Mhm.
fog a mirror, you're hired. I get that you need to fill a spot. There's so many people that, Luis, all they want to do is fill a spot. All I care about is I got somebody sitting in that
Mhm.
chair. And just seems like that is such a recipe for disaster.
It doesn't work when you're looking for warm bodies. Like warm bodies, they will produce heat. but
Yeah.
there will be no energy.
Right.
There will be
Yeah.
heat, but no energy. And so we want people who create energy, and that energy comes through some sort of of passion in life, and that's where you're going to get the biggest return.
And I'm guessing there's probably some negative, there's like some of those people are actually probably toxic. So that it does create heat, but it's like a negative heat where it affects negatively the people around. So I mean, you guys, like you said, you're so particular and careful about hiring. Do you still have some clients that are cowboys when it comes to hiring where, anything goes or, whatever, they just need to hire? Are you still seeing that, or is intentionality becoming much more prevalent?
I mean, I think intentionality is becoming more prevalent, but obviously there are organizations that are growing so fast they find themselves in a place where they have no choice but to really hire as many people as they possibly can.
Yeah.
And but I do think that the more intentional you are about developing your culture, the more likely it is that you're going to attract in mass quantities the type of people you want. And when I think about the consultants we have on staff, we have 7 now. I have no problem finding consultants. It feels like every week people are applying for our business, and the reason
Sure.
is because they see the brand, they know what we stand for, they see what we're developing, and when you do that, you're going to be an attractive company.
Yeah, awesome. Well, as we start to land the plane today, the last one that you talk about for building a team is trust. And to me, that's like the foundation of everything because if you don't trust your team or your team doesn't trust you, I mean, Gallup did that poll and showed that if your team doesn't trust its leadership, the chances of being engaged at work is 1 in 12. And if they do trust you, it's 1 in 2. So there's like this six-fold difference between trust and no trust. So I'm guessing that becomes the hardest because it seems hard to determine. Like you can ask me, do you trust me? I'm like, well, absolutely. But how do you like flush that out? Any feedback for somebody listening that's struggling with trust?
Yeah, and by the way, there's a study, and I can't remember who did it. It may have been Forbes that said that 57% of employees don't believe in the leadership for whom they work. So when you talk about that, that 1 in 2 versus the one in 12, that
Yeah,
means that a lot of companies are suffering. I think trust does take time. They always say you can have trust in a moment and lose it, so very quickly, and it's hard to regain it. I think trust is a multifaceted thing, and that is being vulnerable, transparent, and a person of your word. Many owners and business leaders are not that. Like, I'll give you an
yeah,
example. I know so many business owners that will, to the face of the employee, tell them, "We're not terminating you. You're doing fine. Everything's
yeah,
fine," knowing good and well that they just had a conversation that they were going to terminate this person on Friday.
yeah,
But since they're not the ones doing it, they told the employee that they're not terminating them. And I think that's just wrong. I think
yeah,
that's wrong. I think if
no,
you have a moment where you need to terminate somebody, I think at the first available opportunity, you should let them know that, hey, we are considering letting you go. And these are the reasons why we're considering letting you go. And if they decide to quit in the meantime, then that's their decision. But I'm
yeah,
not going to lie to people. I had a conversation with somebody several years ago where they came to me and they said, I'm worried I'm going to get terminated because I'm not really sure if I'm adding value to the organization. And I looked them in the eyes and said, well, what you're feeling is accurate. We're not exactly sure what we're going to do with this position. And I don't want to lie to you. Like, we're trying to figure out if there's a place for you in the organization. Right now, we've not made a decision,
yeah,
but now knowing this information, if you have an opportunity, absolutely, you know, go for it. But this is what I'm going to promise you. What I'm going to promise you is that if we decide to let you go, we're going to give you at least 1 month's notice. That's what I told the person straight up to their
yeah,
face.
yeah,
And 2 weeks later, they put in their 2 weeks notice, and it was fine. It was fine
yeah,
because we didn't know what we were going to do with them,
right,
and but I didn't think it was fair to be like, no, you're fine.
yeah,
We're gonna be fine, and then the next thing they get sideswiped.
yeah,
So that's one of the reasons why employees historically have not trusted their owners or their leaders. because owners and leaders have historically, unfortunately, lied to too many employees, and that's the culture we've created in our
Right.
business world, unfortunately.
Well, and I think the sad part then too is you extrapolate that out, and if the team can't be trusted, then they go ahead and it kind of the customer experiences the same thing. You
Mm-hmm.
know, if you don't trust me, then I don't, and then the customer doesn't trust me because I'm not trustworthy. You're not trustworthy. I mean, as soon as trust is, questioned, I mean, I remember back how many years ago Tylenol had such a massive scare. But boy, I tell you what, they weathered that thing fantastic because they stayed in front of it. They were fully vulnerable. They were open with everything and they worked their way through it. How easy could it have been to blame the plastic on cap or blame the whatever, right?
Right.
You could have blamed 100 different things. They took full ownership, and I think they actually probably added trust and built more trust by the time that whole thing was finished. So,
Mm-hmm.
but it's easy. It's the easy way out, right? I mean, let's just face it. Hey, Luis, how am I doing? Am I going to be making this, cut this next round of cuts or whatever? Oh, you're fine.
Yeah.
Oof, I go home, tell my wife, and we're, fat, dumb, and happy. And then all of a sudden, now the reality comes, I got a really hard time, ever trusting you, let alone like my next employer and things like that. So
Absolutely.
I love that you have building that, trust for that team. So that's fantastic. Hey, one last question before I let you go, Luis. What would your tip of the day be for somebody listening? Maybe it's something that we covered today. Maybe it's something that's on your heart that we haven't. But what would your tip of the day be for somebody listening today?
Something that's been on my mind, probably the last week as I've been working with entrepreneurs, is this idea of perfection. Nothing's ever going to be perfect. Your business is not going to be perfect. Things are going to go wrong. Things are going to go sideways. There's going to feel like there's chaos. But in the end, what we're really looking for is improvement. And instead of focusing on perfection, focus on improvement. And you're more likely to have a business that ultimately fulfills all of your goals, dreams, and desires in life.
Wow, that's cool. When you did your first book, did you feel like it had to be perfect before you released?
So the funny story about my authorship career is that I wrote
Yeah,
13 books before I released my first one because I wanted it to be perfect. And after I released my first one and I realized it didn't have to be perfect, I've now
yeah.
released four more and I have my next book, Having Tough Conversations, which comes out in a month.
Oh my gosh, that's going to be awesome. Having tough conversations, that is fantastic. That is a great topic to really dig deep in for that book. So that's great. For people that want to learn more about you, Luis, they want to learn more about the eight-figure firm that you're running and owning and that you founded. What's the best way for people to connect with you?
So they can connect with me at luisscottjr.com. So my name, luisscottjr.com. And they can also connect with me on social media. If you follow me on Instagram or any of the platforms, you'll see I'm pretty active. So feel free to reach out and they can find me at luisscottjr on my Instagram and all my handles. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. That's so cool. Thank you for sharing time. And for you listening, again, there was some really great information. And a lot of times, we get stuck in the fear zone. We want to expand and get into the growth zone and the learning zone, but that fear zone really we struggle with. So there might have been something that Luis said that's like, oh my gosh, I got to do that. Just lock into one or two things rather than jump into your next thing right away. Lock into something that he said. There was some great information, whether it's on your team, whether it's about your culture, whether it's your business growth, whether it's the money mindset issues. We just covered a ton of stuff. And if you didn't learn a thing, then call me and then I will send you any of his books for free because if you didn't learn from this, you probably won't learn from the book. But really seriously, find something that works for you so that you can say, hey, I invested 45 minutes and it was really well worth it. I know I learned a ton. I always take notes, which means now I got to do something with these. So I appreciate, Luis, you hanging out with us. And thanks for all that you're doing out there and can't wait to keep learning from you.
Thanks for having me.